At the UN Climate Summit in Brazil, world leaders push for action, not promises, as Nigeria calls for fair climate financing at the COP30. And in the United States, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, has announced she will retire from Congress after nearly 4 decades of public service. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us on World Now. We begin with the Vice President's visit to Brazil at the ongoing UN Climate Summit, where Vice President Kashim Shettima has urged world leaders to move from pledges to performance in tackling the global climate crisis. Speaking at COP30 in Berlin, the Vice President representing President Bola Tinubu reaffirmed Nigeria's climate leadership and commitment to cut emissions by 32% by the year 2035. TVC News State House correspondent Femi Akonde reports.
Nigeria is calling for action, not just promises. At the Leaders Climate Summit, Vice President Kashim Shettima challenged world leaders to turn climate pledges into measurable results that can save lives and protect the planet.
Our continent is rich in renewable resources, biodiversity, and useful ingenuity. I hereby say with absolute certainty that we are not the problem. We are an integral part of the solution. This is why at COP30, we hope to demonstrate that Africa can lead in carbon capture through forests, in renewable energy expansion, in digital monitoring of emissions, and in regional cooperation that translates ambition into prosperity.
VP Shettima unveiled Nigeria's renewed climate agenda anchored on National Carbon Market Framework and the Climate Change Fund, initiatives designed to attract billions of dollars in clean energy and adaptation investments. He insists that climate ambition cannot be financed by goodwill alone, urging fair and equitable financing mechanisms for developing nations.
No nation can finance climate ambition with goodwill alone. Climate finance remains the vehicle of effective implementation, and we therefore call for a reliable and equitable architecture that recognizes the unique realities of developing nations and empowers them to deliver on global commitments.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the world has failed to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius and must act now to avoid catastrophic consequences.
We need a paradigm shift to limit this overshoot's magnitude and duration and quickly drive it down. Even a temporary average overshoot will have dramatic consequences. It could push ecosystems past irreversible tipping points, expose billions to unlivable conditions, and amplify threats to peace and security.
Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva also called for collective global effort, emphasizing that the fight against climate change must go hand in hand with fighting poverty and inequality.
Ele se tornou o espelho das maiores qualidades e limitações da ação multilateral.
And from the United Kingdom, the Prince of Wales, William, echoed a message of responsibility for the future.
Where we unite behind shared purpose, we can scale and accelerate solutions that transcend borders. Solutions that give us hope and fill us with optimism for the future.
From Belém, Brazil, Nigeria joins global calls for urgent climate action, not just promises, to safeguard the planet for generations to come. Femi Akonde, TVC News.
Babawale Obayojo Environment Campaign and Environmental Rights Action joins me on the World Now to discuss the COP30. It's good to have you join us at this time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, Nigeria's Vice President says climate ambition cannot necessarily be financed by goodwill alone. From your own perspective, what kind of, fair and equitable financing should developing countries like Nigeria be pushing for at the COP30?
I think it has been stated clearly from time immemorial. Yes, the goodwill part of it cannot be ruled out. There's a climate debt that is being owed the Global South that needs to be paid. So the African leaders and leaders from Nigeria will need to hinge on that also while looking for the climate. The major climate finance must be based on equity and must be based on justice. There's a climate debt that needs to be paid, and they must demand for that. And the other thing that the government of Africa in particular and government of Nigeria has also embraced it also is they're talking about embracing carbon markets. Because I saw that and I heard the speech by our vice president where he's stating that they're going to embrace the carbon market and look at how they can benefit from the forest to get carbon credit and to impose carbon tax and the likes. This in itself has proven over time not to be a realistic way of generating funds to solve the climate crisis. So there's need for us to sit back clearly and look inwards on ourselves. Agriculture is a place that we need to go back to. Before the advent of oil, before we found oil, agriculture has proved itself to be a place where we can generate income to sustain us and to help us transit or to even help us get money to fund the different developmental projects that we have in the country. So there's need to go back and look inwards and look towards that direction. We can't keep looking at open up our forests, for example, to the capture, to say, okay, for example, blocking some areas of forestry to say those areas are preserved to get carbon credits. That in itself cannot solve the problem. So we need to look inwards in realism or in realistic terms. First, we must demand for the climate debt. Secondly, we must look at how we can generate funds from agriculture. And thirdly, the IT space is another space that we can look at. There are several opportunities in IT that we can look inwards to as a country to generate funds. So we must be looking at always solutions that will keep us a more problem or keep us in the circle that we have been facing with respect to climate and climate change. The first thing we must demand for that. There's no way we can run out of that or we can run away from it. We must demand the debt that is being owed us. And those who have caused led in the process of the climate crisis should lead the process of solving the problem that has been caused already.
Talking about ensuring accountability, let's talk a bit more about the National Carbon Market Framework that Nigeria has recently launched. Do you think Nigeria is really ready for a functioning carbon market? And how do we ensure that this does not just, benefit big corporations? Carbon emissions is still a concern in Nigeria at this moment.
Yeah, so it has been tested before with the RED project. And the particular example of interest is the Ekuri forest, one of the still standing rainforests that we have in this region of the world. That project in itself deprived the people of their livelihoods because they were prevented from using that forest for the activities that they were using them for at that time. So that in itself has proven that that carbon credit mechanism will not succeed because it's going to leave more people in problem and it's going to generate more poverty in the region. And that's not the pathway to go. And now the people who are leading in the process to say they want to pay the carbon credit are the same corporations who have led in the process of generating the carbon in the atmosphere and the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that are already causing the problem for us. So at one hand, they are saying they are solving or they are going to be paying taxes or whatever on the credit or carbon credit mechanism funding that purse. But on the other hand, they are looking for more oil fields to open up to extract oil. So you can't do the two at the same time. One has to give way for the other. If you say you want to stop the climate crisis from escalating, you have to stop extracting for oil because fossil fuel has been adduced by science and many have agreed to this, that is the cause of the climate crisis in itself. So we need to stop extracting for new oil fields, open up new oil wells. That in itself is the first step to solve the climate crisis. Like the example that we always like to use. If you have in your house a running tap that is broken and is spilling water everywhere in your house, it's not for you to go buy sophisticated mop sticks to mop the ground. The best thing to do is to look for the source of the problem and shut it from the source. So the source has been said to be fossil fuel. We need to stop extracting for that and look at alternate solutions to the fossil fuel era that we have been battling with.
I mean, this whole thing sounds very good on paper, but the question should also be how to get these leaders accountable. There was something that Prince William mentioned about ensuring that each country takes responsibility for the future. In terms of, mobilizing young Nigerians, grassroots leaders to ensure that there is accountability in terms of, climate change and all of that. How do we ensure this, especially for countries in Africa, especially?
Accountability issues are things that needs to be done from within us. All of us as citizens of Nigeria, for example, we have not been really holding our leaders to account. Most of the time we elect them into office. We don't follow up on what they do in office. Whatever they do in office is not a priority for us because most people are trying to survive. That in itself needs to be looked at because we have to hold these leaders accountable. We elected them to offices, the ones that we elected into offices, and we ought to hold them accountable. When they are not performing or living up to the billions of what they said they were going to do, we ought to hold them accountable. But this is not happening. So citizens need to get to that point. We need to start that reawakening from within us to begin to hold our leaders accountable to the promises they've made. Now they are making pledges to cut down emissions by 35% or so. But this same government is, on the other hand, trying to look for new oil fields and approving new licenses. So that is hypocrisy in itself, and we need to hold them accountable for that and call the spade what it is. And that in itself needs to be looked at. So that I think first we have to do an internal audit of ourselves, me inclusive. We have to hold our governments accountable.
I like what you mentioned, an internal audit of Nigerians ourselves, individual responsibility, and not just leaving it to the government. That's a fine place to leave it for now. Thank you for talking to us at this time. Babawale Obanyojo, environment campaigner and environmental rights action. Thank you for joining us on The World Now at this time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting.